Hi, welcome back to my channel Mixed Up Melodies. My name is Lily, and today we're going to be talking about the music of The Mandalorian. Did you know that The Mandalorian is actually a spaghetti western? Space spaghetti western, I guess make it more Mando-themed Bascargetti western, Spice-getti. What is a spaghetti western? These are films that were created by Italian directors and filmed in Italy. Therefore, the spaghetti. Sorry, I have my little assistant here. This is Jasper, and he wants to be in the video too. So, if you hear yelling or purring, that's him. Yeah. One of the most iconic composers in this genre is named Ennio Morricone. When you imagine a spaghetti western, his music is what comes to mind. Ennio Morricone is most well known for the Dollars trilogy, one of those movies being The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Because Morricone had a very small budget to work with, he actually improvised a lot of instruments. He used not very conventional instruments like a whip, or guns, or the sound of boot spurs. He was extremely creative with his genre of music. It reminds me a little bit of the experimental era of classical music, which I could talk about for a while, but essentially boiled down to the basics. This type of music was used to find music in places that aren't just instruments, to kind of look for ways that the world around us makes music. It's very big head, a little ridiculous, not really grounded, but honestly kind of fun type of mentality when it comes to writing music. Anyways, Morricone used a lot of cheaper instruments and things that he could play or people around him could easily play. I saw that Morricone had said that this music that he wrote was actually extremely important to the director of these movies, Sergio Leone. Leone had actually decided that some scenes had to go much longer. So if you've ever wondered why some westerns feel kind of slow-paced, it's actually Morricone's fault, because the director would literally wait until Morricone's music is done. That is not how soundtracks are oftentimes done. Typically, the music is recorded after the filming, and even Morricone was confused and thought this was a strange thing, but the director just loved his music and it was really important to him. And so these scenes that could have ended quicker were just drawn out a little bit so that they could hear the end of Morricone's music. I think it's kind of beautiful. Like, music is such a core aspect to westerns. I think that a little bit of this type of filming inspired episodes in The Mandalorian. I don't know if you've ever noticed while watching The Mandalorian, some scenes seem to linger just a little bit longer than they need to, and you always hear this gorgeous swell of music that kind of finishes off the end of that scene. Now I'd like to talk about the composer for The Mandalorian, Ludwig Göransson. Do you want to talk about The Mandalorian? After having completed the score for Black Panther, Ludwig Göransson was approached by Jon Favreau to create spaghetti western style music for The Mandalorian. Favreau said that he wanted a grittier kind of sound instead of the more open sound that a lot of westerns have. He wanted something that had traditional instruments and then also a heavy tech influence on it. He, of course, wanted to integrate a lot of the Star Wars music that has been used throughout all of Star Wars history, but he wanted to go a different direction with it, kind of like he did with The Mandalorian itself. According to an interview with Jon Favreau by ABC News, I like the image of The Mandalorian because it really harkened back to the westerns and samurai films that had originally influenced Lucas. It is a deconstructed version of Clint Eastwood in The Man with No Name, that great, mysterious, fun character to see the world through. And you can hear a lot of those influences within the music itself for The Mandalorian.
See for yourself.
What brings you here, stranger?
I've been searching for you for many parsecs.
Well, now you found me. Weak way. 2 snorts of spotchka.
So let's break it down. I want to talk about the different motifs that I have found in The Mandalorian that seem to pop up all the time. A motif is a melody that you hear throughout a piece, or a rhythm, or something along those lines. It either represents a concept, a character, or some type of theme that's going along with whatever is happening, either in the music or in the story. So, the first one that we hear is the motif that actually reminds me of the opening song for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It is the coyote howl that you hear. This melody is really reminiscent of another melody that Göransson created for The Mandalorian. So Göransson took Morricone's theme and kind of flipped it on its head and kept the idea of it together. He had a low instrument, specifically the bass recorder, playing these intervals, spooky and lonely, and gives this very empty kind of affect to it. And this theme you hear frequently throughout The Mandalorian. Every single episode you will hear this theme. What I find interesting is, depending on the episode, this theme can change. In episode 1, we hear a version of that fifth motif with the bass recorder. And it's when he's walking through the streets to learn more about the bounty that he's going to get. And you hear, instead of this open kind of neutral sound, it starts to become minor. I read it as Din is starting to feel concerned, maybe confused, a little conflicted. I just think it's a really beautiful way of representing that. I believe that this theme is representative of the Mandalorians. And when it's neutral, when it's this open sounding perfect fifths, perfect fourths, it is kind of the idea of the neutrality that the Mandalorians typically seem to have. The Mandalorians are not really known for being a part of one side or the other. I think of this as a true Mandalorian being truly neutral and only loyal to whatever their clan needs. The cool thing is, when we see Din going to work with the Empire, we hear the theme go minor. Later, when Din is working with Kuil, you hear that recorder motif, but it becomes major and kind of has horns behind it. When you see him as a child during the Clone Wars, you hear this recorder motif go minor. It shows that he's really distressed. So I think that it's this motif represents Din being a Mandalorian and him either feeling joy or feeling sadness or anxiousness based off of whether this theme goes major or minor. It's really cool because it shows kind of his leaning towards good or evil. There's also this noise that I have lovingly dubbed the hawk noise. I don't quite know which instrument it is, but I call it the hawk noise. And it is Din's theme. It's when Din comes in as being really cool. And it reminds me once again of the Man with No Name, his coyote howl sound that Morricone gave him. Another extremely important motif that I noticed, I've called it the cool drums. And one of the first times you hear it is when the camera is following the gonk droid. And that's extremely important because I love gonk droids. They're just walking trash cans and my favorite thing I've ever seen. There is a lot of times where Göransson uses kind of ambient sounds or this spooky low bass sound. When Din is following the stormtroopers and walking in to meet with the Imperial client, you hear a lot of these low bass sounds. You also hear this ambient sort of spooky music. Pay close attention to these sounds of this dark, low strings. In my mind, I believe that this is kind of a connection to when Din is specifically working for the enemy or dealing with the enemy or dealing with the Empire. When we see Din present the Beskar to the armorer, you can actually hear the Mandalorian theme really, really quiet in the background.
When one chooses to walk the way of the Mandalore, you are both hunter and prey. How can one be a coward if one chooses this way of life? Have you ever removed your helmet?
No,
Has it ever been removed by others?
never.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
This is the way. This is where it gives me kind of the idea that this theme is specifically for all Mandalorians, not specifically Din. One of my favorite themes is the one that I call the Grogu theme. And it's this high, beautiful bells. It reminds me of Harry Potter or Christmas, and it's just so calming and relaxing and so starkly different than this low bass recorder that you hear from Din all the time. So it's this light and heavy, simple and grungy complicated. It's a really beautiful way to kind of separate the two characters and show how they're different. One of my favorite themes is the motif that I've titled the Giddy Up Cowboy theme. Time to saddle up and get 'em, you know. You hear this beginning, and then you hear the drums come in, and it's very much like da-dum, ba-da, 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 like this pattering, very rhythmic sensation, and you can kind of feel like you're either riding the horse or probably a blurg if this is the Mandalorian, and it just gives this driving sensation. And then we run into the lonely guitar. It's so lonely and kind of sad and really beautiful. And that specific part, in my mind, really harkens back to Morricone's music with his guitar that he uses for all of the music for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it really does give that spaghetti western feeling when you have that guitar, because it's low budget. Once we get past that part, then we have that theme start coming in, the da 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 da. Okay, now we're going. You know, I imagine like the dust kicking up while we start going faster, while we're riding quicker. And this theme, Göransson, when he plays this in this amazing music video that you should check out because it's astounding. When he plays it in his music video, he plays it on the piano. But it's oftentimes played more with strings and horns. So we're kind of bringing in the cavalry, so to speak. This theme is often played when he is going with other people, when he is traveling with others. There's also this really sweet theme. I believe that Göransson called this theme the Razor Crest theme. It is when we have all these high horns that just sound so triumphant. It reminds me of being on a ship and sailing over the seas on a beautiful day. The Razor Crest theme is also where he just swoops in to save the day. Something else that I want to mention about this theme is so different from the other bits where they're very lonely or very sparse or very sad. The Razor Crest is just undeniably happy, undeniably joyful. It's kind of his own take on what Star Wars is. The Mandalorian is definitely a black sheep of the Star Wars films. It focuses on one or I guess two characters that explore this world and navigate through everything, whereas normal Star Wars TV shows and movies kind of have a team of people who navigate through the world together. So it very much leans into that loneliness kind of aspect, and Göransson did an amazing job emphasizing that loneliness with all of the motifs that he came up with. When Göransson started this project, he actually went out and bought a bunch of recorders, those flutes that you learn how to play in elementary school. He also learned how to play those in elementary school. He also stated that he wasn't necessarily an expert at the recorder, but you can do a lot in a studio once you get it down. This theme starts with these recorders. The way that it starts is really interesting too. So it starts on a perfect fifth. Do 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 do. Then we go to a minor 7. Do 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 do. And then we go to a minor 3rd. Do 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 do. And then we go to a perfect 4th. Do 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 do. And then we continue. We start adding harmonies to that. Therefore, it starts feeling more like chords. So this initial melody is really interesting to me because starting with a perfect 5th doesn't really give you a sense of the key. In both major and minor, there is the perfect 5th and perfect 4th interval. So it's completely the same no matter what key you're in. If you do major, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do, versus minor, do, re, mi, fa, sol, le, te, do, te, le, so, fa, me, re, do. You can hear that the do, fa, and the do, sol are in both of those keys. So they're both in the major and the minor key. The only difference is when we get to the minor 7 and the minor 3rd. So in minor key, do, re, mi, fa, sol, le, te, do, te, le, so, fa, me, re, do. You have do, me, which is a flat 3 if we're in major, which is just a minor 3rd. And then we have a minor 7, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, te, do, te. It's not used very often when we play in the minor key because it's taking something that we call the leading tone and making it flat. So it doesn't really feel like it goes anywhere. It feels kind of like you're lost when you use a minor 7. Typically what we do for minor scales is we use a harmonic minor scale. So a harmonic minor is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, so, fa, mi, re, do. So your T is major, not minor, with a te. Really interesting that Göransson decided to use a minor 7. I think that kind of represents this idea of loneliness and kind of a wayward sort of feeling to the Mandalorian. The final motif that I want to talk about is not necessarily a melody. It's more of an affect that is added by Göransson. So before, like I mentioned, Jon Favreau asked Göransson to give a spaghetti western feel, but with more of an electronic kind of vibe. So Göransson kind of took this and took inspiration from electronic music, EDM, and dubstep, and used these really cool synths and just beautiful noises that dubstep has. And he created this kind of electronic creepiness that is added. It's very rhythmic. It doesn't really have a lot of melody behind it frequently, and it's kind of added into the background of other music. It can be heavy and industrial, and it evokes a dubstep sound. My favorite theme that I just adore, and literally when I heard it, I had to rewind the scene 3 or 4 times because I was so enamored with the affect that it gave, was the Dark Troopers theme. Just unreal, right? Ugh. This theme, I mean, he pulls sounds that were made famous by Skrillex, you know, these really electronic kind of crazy sounds, and it makes so much sense. Literally, when the music started, I actually didn't realize that was music. I thought it was the sound of the troopers activating, but it wasn't. It was the music, and it's so cool. Göransson actually uses environmental stuff in his music very frequently. In the movie The Mandalorian and Grogu, there's actually an entire section of the soundtrack that is just the alarms blaring, and it's really jarring, and honestly, every time it comes up when I'm listening to the soundtrack, it scares the heck out of me. But it's very common for him to do. And so when he adds these elements, these tech elements that sound rhythmic and ugly and not at all fitting into the theme, like this is not, you would not hear dubstep in a spaghetti western. It is kind of reminiscent of spaghetti westerns because they use things like whip cracks. That's not an instrument. So I guess, honestly, dubstep feels kind of like a natural progression of spaghetti western music, if that makes sense. If you think about what Morricone did, it kind of does remind me of what dubstep is. It's noise, but it's noise that like you turn into music. It's one of my favorite genres of music, actually. I love all electronic music, so anytime Göransson adds a little bit of techno, I'm into it. But more about The Mandalorian and Grogu in another video. That in itself is amazing enough. I really need to go like scene by scene and talk about everything because it's so good. Before I wrap up, I wanted to quickly mention a few other things about the soundtrack for The Mandalorian. There is another composer who worked extensively on this music. Joseph Shirley is the composer for season 3 of The Mandalorian. Göransson stepped away for a little bit for season 3 of The Mandalorian to work more on Black Panther 2. They decided to stick with Joseph Shirley, who had actually written the music for the Book of Boba Fett. This is something I feel kind of bad about for him. Göransson wrote the theme for the Book of Boba Fett, but then Shirley actually wrote all of the music for the Book of Boba Fett. Goranson's name is on it, even though he really didn't write a lot of the music. He had the original theme and it was beautiful, but Shirley really took that music and you can hear it. You can hear how it's different. And you can also hear how it's different in season 3. We have the Mandalorian themes that Goranson wrote, of course, but Shirley kind of takes it in a different route. Something that I've noticed, actually, that Shirley really loves to do is he adds a lot of chorus in his music. And you don't really hear that in the first couple seasons of The Mandalorian, maybe occasionally, but in Book of Boba Fett, it is everywhere. My theory for that is that it's kind of a reference to the fact that Boba Fett is putting together like a group of people and he's creating a large community, which is different than what Din Djarin is doing because he's still the lone gunslinger with his son. So you kind of hear that difference from Book of Boba Fett to The Mandalorian. They are really similar, but Shirley really shines in the Book of Boba Fett. He does a beautiful job in season 3 of The Mandalorian, but he really is trying to evoke that same sort of writing style that Goranson has in the 3rd season of The Mandalorian. Thank you so much for spending some time with me talking about The Mandalorian. I was absolutely enamored with this show when I first started watching it. And it kind of got me a little bit more into Star Wars. I knew a little bit about Star Wars. I saw the movies, but I hadn't really gotten into it. And watching this show and listening to the music especially really made me feel like I was a part of the Star Wars world. And I can say that my husband really appreciates all of this because all of this stuff is his, it is not mine. So he is a big Star Wars fan, and now we have something that we can talk about together. And it's been really nice to be able to kind of nerd out about the music associated with it. I hope you enjoyed this style of video. This is something that I wanted to keep doing. I would really like to do more analysis on different TV shows and their styles of music and their composers, or just deep diving into some composers. So let me know in the comments if that's something that you would like to see. The next few videos I'm working on are talking about different movies and their soundtracks, and one of the ones I really want to spend a little extra time on is Severance, because that music is really interesting. So please stick around for those videos. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
This is the way.